My name is Laura, and I'm 34. I've been married to Tom for almost 7 years, and while I'd love to say our marriage has been perfect, the truth is, it's been anything but. Like any couple, we've had our ups and downs, but lately the downs have felt heavier, lingering longer than I'd like to admit. That's why, when my friends suggested a girls' night out, I jumped at the chance. I needed a break from the tension at home, the silent dinners, the unspoken frustrations. I needed to vent. We met at our favorite cafe, the one with the cozy booths tucked away in the back. As the wine flowed, so did the conversation. We laughed about old memories, shared work drama, and eventually, the topic shifted to relationships. "So, how are things with Tom?" one of my friends, Jessica, asked. I hesitated, glancing down at my glass. "It's fine," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Come on, Laura," Sarah chimed in. "We know that tone." "Spill." I sighed, feeling the weight of their expectant gazes. "Honestly, it's been rough," I admitted. "He's so stubborn, Like, everything has to be his way. And God forbid I try to talk to him about how I feel. It's like talking to a wall." They nodded sympathetically, and their encouragement emboldened me. I kept going, letting out every frustration that had been building for months. "Sometimes I don't know," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. "I feel like I hate him, like really hate him. He doesn't listen, he doesn't help, and it's like he doesn't even care anymore." I didn't notice that my phone, which had been sitting on the table, had lit up. I didn't notice that my finger had accidentally brushed the screen, answering a call I hadn't realized was coming through. "Maybe I'm just being dramatic," I continued, laughing bitterly. "But I swear, some days, I don't even know why I'm still with him." It wasn't until Jessica's eyes widened and she gestured toward my phone that I realized something was wrong. "Laura!" she hissed, her voice urgent. I froze, glancing down at the screen. My heart stopped. "Active call? Tom!" The room spun as panic surged through me. How long had the call been going? What had he heard? "Oh my God," I whispered, fumbling to end the call. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to hang up. The table fell silent, my friends exchanging uneasy glances. "Do you think he heard everything?" Sarah asked cautiously. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing, replaying every word I'd just said, each one more damning than the last. When I finally managed to compose myself enough to leave, the drive home felt like an eternity. My stomach churned with dread as I pulled into the driveway, the house looming before me like a judgmental shadow. Inside, I found Tom sitting on the couch, his phone in his hand. He looked up as I walked in, his expression calm but distant. That was the worst part. He wasn't yelling, wasn't accusing. He just stared at me with an unreadable gaze that made my chest tighten. "Hi," I said weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. He set his phone down and leaned back, crossing his arms. "So," he said, his tone even but cold. "How much of it was true?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in years, I was truly speechless. And in that silence, I realized just how much damage I had done. The house was suffocatingly quiet after Tom's question. He sat on the couch, staring at me, waiting for an answer. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I could barely think. "How much of it was true, Laura?" he repeated, his tone still calm, but his voice colder now, cutting through the silence. "Tom," I started, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean it. I wasn't serious. It was just venting. You know how things get when I'm with the girls. We exaggerate. Exaggerate?" He cut me off, his eyes narrowing. "So, what? You don't actually hate me, but you thought it'd be fun to say you do? You thought it'd be a good joke to tell your friends our marriage is a joke?" "No, of course not," I said quickly, stepping closer. "That's not what I meant at all. I was just frustrated, okay? I didn't mean for it to come out like that." Tom stood up abruptly, his movements sharp. "Frustrated?" he repeated, letting out a bitter laugh. "Laura, I listened to you for 5 minutes. 5. Do you know what it's like to sit there hearing your wife say she hates you? That she doesn't know why she's still with you?" I flinched at his words, the reality of what he'd heard hitting me all over again. "I wasn't thinking," I said softly. "I was upset, and I said things I didn't mean. Tom, I love you. You know that." "Do I?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "Because right now, it doesn't feel like it. Right now, it feels like you've been pretending, like this whole marriage is just convenient for you." "That's not fair," I protested, tears welling up in my eyes. "You know that's not true." "Do I?" he said again, shaking his head. "Because, Laura, the way you talk about me, the way you dismissed me like I'm some useless roommate, how am I supposed to believe anything else?" I didn't know how to respond. He was right. Every word I'd said at that cafe had been cruel, thoughtless, and now I was paying the price. "Tom, I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I was angry and I said things I shouldn't have. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't mean them." "But you thought them," he snapped, his voice sharp now. "You didn't just make those words up out of nowhere, Laura. You've been holding on to those feelings, haven't you? And instead of talking to me about them, you told your friends. What am I supposed to do with that?" I took a shaky breath, trying to hold myself together. "You're right," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been frustrated. I've been feeling stuck, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it. So, I took the easy way out and vented to my friends instead. But that doesn't mean I don't love you, Tom. It doesn't mean I don't want this marriage to work." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression a mix of anger and hurt. "How am I supposed to believe that, Laura? How am I supposed to trust you after this?" "I'll prove it to you," I said desperately. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just, please don't give up on us." He let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I can do this," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if I can keep being in a marriage where I feel like I'm the last person you respect." His words felt like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You're not," I said softly. "Tom, you're everything to me. I know I've made mistakes, huge mistakes, but I want to fix them. I want to fix us." "I don't know if I can believe that," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Because right now it feels like I'm the only one who's been trying." "That's not true," I said, tears spilling over now. "I've been trying too, Tom. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." "Well, now you do," he said, his tone sharp again. "And it might be too late." His words hung in the air, the silence between us growing heavier with each passing second. Finally, he turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room. Over the next few days, the distance between us only grew. Tom avoided being home whenever he could, throwing himself into work or going out with friends. When he was home, he stayed in the guest room, barely speaking to me. Every time I tried to talk to him, he would shut me down with a curt, "Not now." I started to realize just how deeply I had hurt him, not just with my words at the cafe, but with my actions leading up to that night. I had taken him for granted, brushed off his feelings, and let my own frustrations fester instead of addressing them. I wanted to fix things, but every time I looked at Tom, I saw the pain in his eyes, the walls he was putting up to protect himself from me, and for the first time I wondered if I had already lost him. It was nearly a week before Tom agreed to sit down and talk. The days of silence had been excruciating, the tension in the house so thick it felt like a physical weight. When I finally asked him if we could talk, his response was curt. "Fine, but I don't know if it'll change anything." We sat at the dining table, the same place where we'd shared countless meals and conversations. But this time, the air between us felt cold and distant. Tom's arms were crossed, his face unreadable as he stared at me across the table. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I laced them together. "Tom," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "I know I've hurt you, and I hate that I've made you feel this way. I want to explain, but more than that, I want to make things right." He raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. "Explain what, Laura? That you don't actually hate me? Because I heard you loud and clear." It wasn't just one sentence, it was 5 minutes of you telling your friends how awful I am. So, which part am I supposed to believe wasn't true? His words hit like a punch, but I forced myself to stay composed. None of it was true, I said quickly. I was venting, Tom. I was frustrated and angry, and I let my emotions get the better of me. But I don't hate you. I love you. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You love me, he repeated. That's funny, because it didn't sound like love when you were telling your friends how much you resent me, or how you don't know why you're still married to me. Do you have any idea how that felt? To hear my wife, my partner, say those things? Tears welled up in my eyes as his words sank in. Tom, I can't even imagine how much that hurt you, I said, my voice trembling. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do now is tell you how sorry I am and promise to do better. Do better? He said, his tone sharp. How, Laura? How do you plan to fix this? Because it's not just about the words. It's about what those words mean. You said them because you feel them, don't you? I shook my head quickly, my tears spilling over. No, Tom, I don't, I insisted. I said them because I was upset and I didn't know how to handle my emotions. I let them fester instead of talking to you. But I don't hate you. I never have. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he looked at me with disbelief. If that's true, then why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you talk to me instead of running to your friends to trash me? Do you know how humiliating it is to know that they've been hearing this from you behind my back? I didn't mean for it to get to this point, I said softly. I was wrong, Tom. I was wrong to talk to them instead of you, and I was wrong to let my frustrations build up. But I swear to you, I didn't mean what I said. I was just venting. He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. Laura, I've been trying to figure out if I can believe that, he said. But the truth is, I don't know. How am I supposed to trust you after this? How am I supposed to believe that you don't feel all those things you said? His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time I saw just how deeply I had hurt him. This wasn't just about the words I'd said. It was about the years of neglect, the small cracks in our relationship that had built up to this moment. I don't expect you to trust me right away, I said, my voice breaking. I know I have to earn it, and I will. I'll do whatever it takes, Tom. I'll go to therapy. We can go to counseling together. Just, please, don't give up on us. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and uncertainty. Finally, he spoke. I'm not saying I'm giving up, he said quietly, but I need time. I need space to figure out if I can move past this, because right now, I don't know if I can. His words cut deeper than I expected, but I nodded, wiping away my tears. I understand, I said softly. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, and I'll be working on myself in the meantime. Tom stood up, his shoulders slumping as he let out a heavy sigh. We'll see, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, before walking out of the room. I sat there long after he left, the weight of his words settling over me. He hadn't given up completely, but the road to rebuilding his trust and repairing our marriage felt impossibly long. For now, all I could do was hope that I hadn't already lost him. The days after our confrontation felt hollow, as if the life had drained out of our home. Tom didn't leave, but he wasn't really there either. He stayed in the guest room, only speaking to me when absolutely necessary, his words cold and distant. I tried to bridge the gap with small gestures, leaving his favorite coffee on the counter in the morning, offering to make dinner, even suggesting we watch one of his favorite shows together, but every effort was met with polite indifference or silence. It became clear that Tom wasn't ready to let me back in, and I didn't know if he ever would be. Tom threw himself into his routines, spending more time at work or at the gym, and when he was home, he stayed behind closed doors. He began reaching out to old friends, people he hadn't spoken to in years. One night, I overheard him laughing on the phone, a sound that felt both comforting and devastating. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh since the night of the call, but it wasn't directed at me. Meanwhile, I was left alone with my thoughts. replaying that night over and over in my head. I couldn't stop hearing my own voice, the cruel, careless words I'd said about him, and the way I'd casually dismissed the man I claimed to love. I began to realize that the issue wasn't just what I'd said, it was the deeper pattern it revealed. I had been taking Tom for granted for years, brushing off his needs and feelings while letting my own frustrations fester. I'd let resentment build up instead of addressing it, and in doing so, I'd made him feel small and unimportant in our marriage. To understand myself better, I started therapy. Sitting in that room, laying out the cracks in our relationship was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself, my tendency to deflect with humor, my avoidance of difficult conversations, and my failure to truly appreciate the quiet strength Tom brought to our marriage. Meanwhile, Tom's changes became more noticeable. He was more confident, more assertive. He started talking about potential career changes, about hobbies he wanted to pursue. Seeing him grow and thrive should have made me happy, and in some ways, it did. But it also terrified me. It felt like he was preparing for a future where I wasn't part of his life. One night, I finally worked up the courage to ask him how he was feeling. "Tom," I said hesitantly as he sat at the kitchen table scrolling on his phone, "can we talk?" He looked up at me, his face neutral. "About what?" "About us," I said softly. He sighed, setting his phone down. "What do you want to know, Laura?" I need to know where we stand," I said, my voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you and I'm trying to make things right, but I can't tell if you even want to try anymore." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I'm still angry, Laura. I'm still hurt. And I don't know if I can move past what you said, because I can't stop hearing it either." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I nodded. "I understand," I said softly. "And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I want to keep trying, Tom. I want to fix this, even if it takes time." He let out a heavy sigh, leaning back in his chair. "It's not just about time," he said. "It's about whether or not I believe things will really change. Because I can't go back to how things were, Laura. I won't." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I nodded, wiping away a tear. "I don't want to go back either," I said. "I want to be better. For you, for us, for myself." He didn't respond, and after a moment he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone again. In the weeks that followed, I continued therapy, working on my patterns and learning how to communicate better. I made a conscious effort to show Tom how much I valued him, even if he wasn't ready to accept it yet. Tom, for his part, remained distant but not entirely closed off. There were moments, fleeting but hopeful, when I saw glimpses of the man who used to trust me, who used to laugh with me. Those moments reminded me that rebuilding wasn't impossible, even if it felt that way most days. I didn't know what the future held for us. Tom hadn't decided whether he wanted to stay or leave, and that uncertainty was a constant ache in my chest. But I knew one thing. No matter what happened, I would never take him for granted again. Whether we made it together or not, I was determined to become someone who truly valued the people she loved,